I tried to play Assassin's Creed Valhalla and failed. I wanted to love this game, but 45 hours in, I gave up. And here we are discussing it. Assassin's Creed Valhalla is a massive open world RPG. It's the third game in the Ancients trilogy from the beloved Assassin's Creed series. To start off, this game is already divisive due to the fact it's even called Assassin's Creed in the first place. Some feel that this game and the other two in the series stray too far away from the AC roots, and I'm not here to say whether you're right or you're wrong about those feelings. I will only be looking at this game as another massive RPG from the Ancient trilogy and comparing it against the others in the trilogy, and looking at this game in the wide world of other story-driven RPGs. If you don't already know, Ubisoft is a very disliked company and developer due to their aggressive monetization and predictable game design. Assassin's Creed Valhalla is a great game that sadly had a death from 1,000 cuts. It has so many great ideas and well-executed ideas. This is truly great in so many ways, but yet it's so bloated and aggressively stuffed with so much filler that if this was a Boston cream donut, it would be sitting in a puddle of cream. I started this game loving it. I am a huge fan of Odyssey and on a lesser extent Origins. Odyssey is one of my top 15 favorite games of all time. This might be heresy to say, but Odyssey in my eyes is up there with The Witcher 3. Now don't get me wrong, The Witcher 3 is a better game overall, but it's up there. I thought the world of Odyssey was breathtaking and immersive. It felt like a living, breathing depiction of Greece. Traveling the land and sea never got old. Each area felt distinct and different from one another. Not as much in Origins, but it did have at least different enough areas. And the point I'm trying to reach is that Assassin's Creed Valhalla's world is beautiful, but it's skin deep. Wide as an ocean, shallow as a puddle. Every area feels almost identical to the other. I actually had moments where I thought I was in the wrong area because it looked identical to another area. But I realized I was in the right location because I checked the map and the quest marker was in the same area as me. Again, the world is gorgeous, but the whole world feels the same, causing it to slowly feel repetitive with the story not helping that problem. They so badly want you to explore the world, and trust me, at first, that's all I wanted to do. I was going to every marker in every interesting location. I was doing the raids, I was doing the world events until suddenly I just stopped caring. I was on a hamster wheel. Every chest was the same. The world events were cool but not substantial. I would only go after the big stuff like armor and wealth. Let's talk about loot. The game has a slow drip of loot when it comes to armor and weapons. You will most likely find materials like leather and iron. The second most common find is the materials for upgrading your ship in Ravensthorpe, which we will get to soon. Then you got the armor, the abilities, and the weapons. This system sucks. They overcorrected the problem they had in Odyssey. Now see, people complain that Odyssey had way too much gear. Ubisoft went for a more Diablo and looter shooter approach to gear, and you would find 10 different versions of the same sword with slightly different stats. Now let me be very clear. I prefer the gear system in Odyssey and other looters. I am a stats and numbers game person. However, I agreed that Odyssey had too much gear that was just number changes, but now they have the opposite problem. You once in a great while find a new piece of gear and almost always find something you don't use. For example, I ran a single axe and light shield build, and I rarely found axes or shields, and when I did, the stats were usually lower, and even after upgrading it, would be weaker than what I have. Then 10 or so hours later, you find a weapon that actually raises your stats. Then armor is the same problem. You will always find gear that's too low on stats, leaving you bummed out for a new find, making you not want to care or want to go searching for gear because it's always disappointing. Now, same thing with the abilities that you find in the open world, which is a system I really don't like. I rather unlock abilities through progression rather than a hope and pray approach where you have no idea where the books are, and when you do find them, it's an ability you probably don't want. I would go hours and hours without finding any abilities and then get excited to find one just to not want the ability. One thing I do like is the skill tree. I know most people hate the skill tree, but again, I'm a numbers and stats nerd. I love seeing numbers go up. I, however, don't like that some huge abilities are hidden behind clouds on the skill tree, making it hard to decide which direction you should progress the skill tree. The whole tree should be visible for crafting your build perfectly. Some people like to plan their builds way in advance, and if they can't see the tree, they can't craft their build well. The skill tree was a great idea, but like everything else, executed poorly. Let's talk about combat. The combat can be a lot of fun, but honestly, I think that the combat in Odyssey was much better. When I first picked up Valhalla, I actually hated the combat and just walked away. I did, however, obviously come back to Valhalla. The combat is just really janky. The best way I can describe it is when you get good at it, it can feel satisfying, but it's bad due to trying to feel weighty and chunky. It instead feels unresponsive and jerky. Like, who thought putting the physical abilities on the heavy attack button? Who thought making dual wielding pointless because your damage doesn't go up due to having second weapon? Also, while dual wielding, L1 is both parry and special attack. The bow abilities do make sense to be on the aim button, but still doesn't feel right. The combat is just a huge step down from Odyssey. Now the parry window doesn't feel right, but if you spam L1, you will never miss a parry. I do like the bow combat. The feeling of swapping between ranged and melee flows good, and adding weak points to break posture is dope. That's one thing I think was done well, and that's the posture meters. If you attack a weak point or do enough heavy attacks, it opens up a stun attack, which is a kill animation that one-shots the enemy. It seriously never gets old. One thing that looks awful and feels awful is the stomp. If you knock over an enemy, you can stomp on them. It glitches out a lot. The enemy will be like 10 feet away from you and you're stomping on the ground and it still causes damage to the enemy. But all of that, and my reason for not finishing this game, is the repetitive main story progression. You are a Viking. You made camp and made an established land called Ravensthorpe, and you are trying to go to all the regions and do those regions' story to then get their alliance or conquer them to force their alliance. This story progression is painfully repetitive, and the story is dragged out to be 60 to 70 hours, not including side stuff that you might do. I hit 45 hours and I could not bring myself to continue. There are still like 6 regions to make alliances with, and the main story with your clan and your family that gets kicked to the side for all the boring segmented stories. I think they really wanted this game to feel long and substantial. It, however, became bloated and unbearable. And I'm not even going to touch on all the added stuff like going to Valhalla and the God storyline or the repeatable endless roguelite mode. There's 3 DLC packs, and you can go back to Norway for more content, and there's also the Land of the Sky with its own story segment. It's way too much. It's not well paced. Nothing seems to connect very well. It just becomes an errand boy conquer simulator. And they want you to work on your encampment that I have trouble pronouncing, Ravensthorpe, but after getting the few important main buildings, I lost interest in trying to grow the land. It just became build this hut for feast buff, spammed a bunch of times. There's so much more that I could dive into, but this video would also be bloated, just like the game. This game is spoiled by a boring story spread so thin and long. It's repetitive and monotonous. The combat is decent, but not nearly as good as most other RPGs with action combat. The armor and progression system feels unrewarding and lacking. I wanted to love this game, and I tried to play Assassin's Creed in 2024 and failed. Peace out, guys.